Okay, so we've got a player called Josh here who sent in one of his training videos for a quick analysis, which is cool. So what I'll do is I'll let the video run through so we can get a good idea of what Josh is doing in this video, what he's trying to achieve, and I'll give a few pointers of feedback on this. So just remember that context is always key, and I don't have the full context of Josh's thinking behind this session, or maybe he's doing it with one of his coaches. I don't have the full context of why he's doing this session, so I can only really give some surface level feedback and comments on this. But what we can see so far is that Josh is using the different lines of the pitch to cover different distances. It's all pretty much the same intensity, it's steady state, it's continuous. There's a little bit of stop-start in there when he's hitting the different lines of the pitch and turning. And then it looks like when he comes all the way back here, that's going to be probably the end of his rep or the end of his set for this running. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll play it through as I make some comments over this. So in terms of this intensity and being straight line, there's really two times where I would recommend utilising something like this as a footballer. The first one is if you're coming back from injury and you want to get some running work through the lower body, but you don't want to put the injured area or the joints through too much stress. So you know you can do everything straight line and it's pain-free for you. And that just means you can get out on the pitch and do some running. But you don't want to be too explosive because that might set you back in terms of your injury. So that's a good time to utilize something like this, which is straight line and steady state, and you're sort of working as hard as you can, but not going beyond sort of 80% of your speed intensity. And then, sometimes when you might try and push it and you think you're not ready, just pull it back. That's fine to utilize something like this then. Another time might be when you've had a significant amount of time without doing any training, just looking to get your body back into the swing of things and get some running work through there out on the football pitch. That's another time where you could utilize this. But outside of those two scenarios, for me, really, we can be training in a more specific way if we're looking to improve stamina. So the first thing that I would do is I would make this a lot more multi-directional. So whether you're in pre-season or during the season and you're looking for an edge in your stamina, you can make this a lot more multi-directional, mimic the movements that you would do out on the football pitch as much as possible. It's not all linear. We're going to be turning left, right, turning back on ourselves. We're going to be jumping, landing. So you want to get all those different impacts and forces going through the joints as much as possible, because we're not only looking for, with this work, we can not only increase our stamina, okay, but we can also condition our joints so that we're more injury resilient as well. So we need to make sure we're getting those different angles and forces through the joints, through the movements that we're covering in our stamina work. That's going to give you more bang for your buck out of your training time. Okay, so multi-directional is the first thing, jumping, landing as well, get those in there. The second thing I would do is I would make it a lot shorter and sharper. So I'd use much higher intensities. When we're decelerating at high speed, and the same when we're accelerating off at high speed as well, or as fast as you possibly can. Okay, so we want to get those high velocities in there, so make sure we're touching those week to week, and at the same time we can also touch upon trying to improve our speed at the same time, depending on the timing of the session and how many reps and sets you're doing as well. So multi-directional and much higher intensities. In terms of the distances covered in a match, 5 to 10 meters or 5 to 10 yards are the really key distances to cover at speed. So you can reach those 50-50 balls, burst past players, things like that. Then anything, up to probably 20-25 meters, then anything over 30 meters, you're unlikely to probably cover in a straight line without changing direction at some point or having to slow down at some point, unless you're fullback doing like an overlap and you're sprinting a longer distance. That might be more relevant for you. But outside of that, I'd make the distances a little bit shorter, cover them at a high intensity, multi-directional, and stop-start, and get some jumps and lands in there as well. If you're working at this sort of intensity, then you can also get the ball in there as well, because when you're working at a higher intensity, working with the ball at your feet is probably going to slow down naturally your running speed. Okay, so when we're working at a lower intensity, we can add the ball in there because it doesn't matter about that effect too much. So that would just make it a little bit more, I guess, maybe a little bit more fun, a bit more, get a better transfer over onto the pitch as well. When you're working at high intensities in terms of your stamina, and you want to get the ball involved, you can, but you could just do someone serving you the ball and doing like a 1-2, so playing it back to them. In terms of dribbling with the ball is going to mean that you're probably not going to reach your maximum velocity. It's going to slow you down naturally. So just try and focus on your actual running in those periods during the season when you're just doing a quick session to get an edge. Just focus on your running and the quality of your running and making sure you're touching on those elements that I just mentioned before. Okay, if I was to be hyper picky, I would say, especially when you're working at intensities like this and you're trying to get everything out of the session, we can look at running technique and running form as well. So just here, I just spotted that the arms are a little bit all over the place. It's nothing outrageous. And again, I'm being hyper picky, that the arms are a little bit side to side, as I can see as Josh is moving. Okay, and what that is basically doing is it's sapping energy just by tiny percentages as he's moving, because he's moving in a straight line. So ideally we want those, elbows tucked in, everything moving us forward in a straight line, all that force and energy being used efficiently to move us forwards. When our elbows are going side to side, okay, we're losing force because it's going across the body. So imagine like an Olympic sprinter, everything is pointed forwards. Okay, in this one, where it's all straight line, the elbows are a little bit side to side. Obviously, if we're doing multi-directional work, you're not going to be able to focus on that as much. That would just be when you're doing straight line stuff in terms of sprinting, and to focus on it also when you're doing work at this sort of intensity as well. You could look at that. It's very hard to undo the running style of someone who's been doing that for decades. But if you want to get the most out of your training time, then you could also focus on that as well, to look just for those tiny little improvements which will make you more efficient in terms of your energy. The other thing I want to mention, in terms of stamina training, another really efficient thing to think about in terms of increasing your fitness out on the football pitch is by trying to increase your top speed. So if you increase your top speed by 10%, okay, then think about when you're moving at your previous top speed, that isn't going to be your body working at 100% intensity. So that speed is going to be less stressful and sap less energy from the body than it previously did, just because you've increased your top speed a little bit. Again, these are tiny little percentages, but when they add up all around the body in all areas of your training, it can have a big impact, especially when you're playing at the highest level. So think about that as well. We'll make sure we're hitting those high velocities, and we can potentially increase our top speed over time, and then every speed below that just becomes a little bit easier on the body. Then out on the pitch, it's going to be preserving a little bit more energy, so you can last a bit longer on the pitch. So not only are we getting that stimulus to increase our stamina, okay, but we're also trying to increase our top speed a little bit and making things a little bit easier along the way, at the same time as improving our running and movement economy at the same time, and also becoming more injury resilient by making sure we're covering those different movements, those stops and starts, those changes of direction, those landings, those pushing off movements, all really key. And those are the movements that you're going to find on the pitch are the most energy sapping. So if you can repeat those time and time again, you're going to be able to keep up with play better. Interestingly, studies have shown that the distances that players are covering at the highest level aren't really increasing too much, but what is increasing in recent years is the amount of repeated high intensity bouts throughout that make up that distance. Okay, so when you're training, it makes sense to try and match the pace of the game rather than thinking about the length of the game. So let's match the intensity and see how often we can repeat those intensities with as little drop off in speed between each effort as we possibly can. That's going to have the best carryover onto your football performance on the pitch. So this is a really it's a good drill for someone who's coming back from injury, looking to get some running through the lower body, get out onto the pitch, or if you haven't done anything in a significant amount of time, it's looking to get your body back into the swing of things without putting too much stress through the joints, then this is also a good starting place. But outside of that, you could make it more efficient by utilising the different points there that I've just mentioned. So hope you got some value from that. Let me know your comments below. If you've got a video that you would like analysed, send it into one of our pages, and we'll have a look at that and get a video up for you. So hope you enjoyed it, and catch you in the next video.